A humble grocery store owner in South Baton Rouge quietly helps a struggling mother and her children by giving them food they can't afford. After a bystander films the act and posts it online with criticism, the man faces public backlash and isolation. But days later, soldiers and veterans, some of whom he once saved during his military service, arrive to honor him, revealing his heroic past. Welcome to my channel. They say you can tell everything about a place by who walks in when the rain starts. That evening in Millbrook, Kentucky, the sky had cracked open just after 5. You know the kind of rain I'm talking about, none of that soft drizzle stuff. This was the hard, relentless, windshield wiper breaking, boot-soaking kind. And I happened to be waiting out the worst of it in a little roadside diner called Maisie's. I wasn't there for the food. Truth be told, I'd already finished my shift hauling pallets over at the mill and was just nursing a coffee until the storm let up. Place was nearly empty. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and the soft shuffle of Ella, the waitress. Ella was 29, maybe 30, hair tied back in a ponytail that had started to sag from a full day's worth of gravity and sweat. Her apron had ketchup on it, left side, near the pocket, and she moved like someone who'd been told, just a few more minutes 3 hours ago. I'd known Ella a little. She was the kind of girl who remembered your order by your face, not your name. Said thank you like she meant it. And even when she looked tired, and Lord, she looked tired that night, there was still something gentle in her eyes. Not soft, exactly, but kind. Outside, the neon open sign in the window was flickering. It cast this broken glow on the linoleum floor inside, like something out of a noir movie. Every once in a while it'd go dark, then blink back to life with a buzz, making the shadows dance along the walls. That's when the door creaked open. No bell. Just the squeal of rusted hinges and a gust of wind that carried the scent of wet pavement and gasoline. He stepped in slow, like every joint hurt just enough to remind him he was still breathing. The man wore a long, soaked navy blue coat, one of those old military styles, double-breasted, with faded brass buttons. His beard was gray, full but uneven, and there was a deep scar running from his temple to the edge of his ear. On his leg was a makeshift bandage, stained with something too dark to be just water. And in his hands, shaky, gnarled things that looked like they'd been through every winter since Korea, he clutched a soggy army cap like it was the last clean thing he owned. He didn't say a word at first, just stood there with the rain dripping off him, puddling on the tile in front of the door. Ella noticed him before I did. She didn't flinch or hesitate. She just tucked the rag she'd been using to wipe down the counter into her apron and walked right over to him. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, voice soft like a lullaby left out in the sun too long. The man looked at her, and I swear, there was something behind those eyes. Not madness. Not even sadness, really. It was emptiness. The kind that only happens when you've carried too many names in your heart and buried too many friends in the same year. He spoke in a whisper, so faint I had to lean forward to catch it. "Just a cup of hot water, miss. And if you've got any breadcrumbs that ain't gone stale, I'd be grateful for the rest of my days." Now you gotta understand, there wasn't a soul in that room who didn't hear it. Not even old Roy back in the kitchen, who was half-deaf and usually didn't care about anything except the radio and whether the fryer was still hot. I saw Ella hesitate just a heartbeat. Not because she didn't want to help, but because she knew what it might cost her. She glanced toward the back where the manager, Walt, usually perched during the late shift. He wasn't in sight. That gave her just enough courage. "I'll see what I can do," she said, with a smile so small it almost got lost in the steam from the coffee pot. The old man gave a nod. Not a thankful one. Not yet. More like a cautious agreement, like someone who's been told kindness before only to have it yanked away right when he reached for it. Ella disappeared into the kitchen. I watched the man lower himself slowly onto a stool at the counter. He set his cap down beside him and stared at it like it was an old friend he hadn't seen in years. I glanced at the insignia on his coat. Barely there, but enough to make out a patch that looked like it hadn't been stitched in decades. I knew it from my uncle's coat back home. Airborne Division. Vietnam, maybe Korea. Ella returned a few minutes later with a full plate, roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, even a slice of pie. And not the leftover kind either. Looked fresh. She set it in front of him with a quiet, it was a returned order. Still warm. Then she poured him a coffee, slid the mug close. "This one's on the house." The man stared down at the plate like it was a trap. Then, slowly, his hands moved to the utensils. Not with hunger, at least, not just hunger. With reverence. "You remind me of my wife when she was young," he murmured, after a few bites. She used to do the same. Said warmth is owed to those who've lived too much cold. He touched his wedding ring, worn thin, probably hadn't come off in 50 years. That's when the door to the kitchen slammed open, and Walt stepped out. I'll tell you about that next, how kindness cost Ella more than her job, and how the old man's past came storming and like thunder behind the rain. But for now, just know this. That night started with a flickering neon sign and a cup of coffee. But before it was done, it would shake the whole town to its core. Walt lumbered out from the kitchen with the grace of a rusted-out tractor, face flushed red, and jaw working like he was chewing something sour. The second he laid eyes on the plate in front of the old man, it was like a match hit dry hay. "What the hell is this?" he barked, loud enough that the glass salt shakers on the counter rattled. Ella froze. I saw her hands twitch toward her apron, maybe instinct, maybe habit. The old man set down his fork, his spine stiffening like he was about to be called to attention. He didn't say a word, just reached slowly for his cap. "I told you before," Walt spat, voice rising with every syllable, "this ain't a soup kitchen, Ella. You want to feed strays, you do it on your time, not mine." The diner went dead quiet. There were maybe 3 other customers in the place, truckers, mostly, and one older woman who came in every Tuesday for the early bird special. Every one of them stared hard at their food, like they were afraid eye contact might make them responsible. "I'll pay for it," Ella said, voice low but steady. "From my tips." "That's not the point," Walt snarled, slamming his fist on the counter. "You disobeyed me. Again. That's insubordination. Then take it out of my pay." "Just don't," she began. "You're fired." He cut her off, finger jabbing toward the door. "Get your things and get out." For a moment, no one moved. Rain still beat against the windows like a drumline. The old man started to rise, wincing as his leg buckled under him. The bandage had slipped, and I saw fresh red seeping through. But he stood anyway, proud. Like gravity was a challenge he'd met before and wouldn't lose to now. "I didn't mean to cause no trouble," he said quietly. "I can go." Ella stepped between him and Walt. "He's not the problem," she said, and it wasn't defiant. It wasn't loud, but it was true. "You are." Walt's face twisted, like the truth was poison in his mouth. A woman across the diner leaned toward her friend and whispered, just loud enough to carry. "That's what happens when you bring trouble inside. You get what you deserve." Ella's lips pressed into a tight line, but she didn't cry. She just took off her apron, folded it neatly, and laid it on the counter. Her hand shook only a little, and I'll be damned if anyone else stood up. Not one soul. The silence in that place was colder than the rain outside. She walked out the door with her head high, the old man trailing a few paces behind. I grabbed my jacket and followed, dropping some bills on the table, more than I owed. I didn't care. I couldn't sit there and watch decency get shoved out the door like a stray dog. Outside, the rain hadn't let up. It was coming down in sheets now, splattering against the sidewalk and pooling in the gutters. Ella stood beneath the flickering neon sign, shoulders hunched, her canvas bag clutched to her chest. The old man caught up and pressed something into her hand. His voice was hoarse but steady. "You just saved a shattered soul, child." Then he slipped away into the storm, limping down Main Street until the night swallowed him whole. I caught up to Ella just as she was staring down at what he'd given her, a worn, scratched-up dog tag. "McAllister, John R." It read. Blood type. Service number. A life reduced to letters and digits, but somehow more weighty than any ID ever issued. She turned it over in her hand like it was fragile, like it might fall apart if she gripped it too tight. "You okay?" I asked. She gave a small laugh, bitter and tired. "I just got fired for a plate of roast beef and a cup of coffee." "No," I said. "You got fired for doing what was right." She didn't answer. Just looked down the street in the direction the old man had gone. Back at her apartment, a rundown unit above the laundromat near the train tracks, she let me walk her to the door. Said thanks. That was all. I left her there with her key in the lock and rain dripping off her hair. Inside, I later learned, she dried off the one-eyed tabby that had taken up residence in her window a few months back. Gave it the last bit of milk she had. Checked her bank balance on a cracked phone screen. $42 and change. Rent was due in 10 days. By morning, the storm had passed. But the storm inside was only just beginning. Someone, probably that teenager I'd seen with his phone out, had posted a video. Shaky, low quality, but clear enough. Ella standing between Walt and the old man. Walt screaming, jabbing a finger. Her saying quietly, "I'll pay for it with my own tips." It spread like fire. Not the good kind, either. I saw the comments roll in by lunchtime. Rules are rules. Should have asked permission first. Bet she's been stealing food all along. Not one damn mention of kindness. And by noon, she'd been blocked by half her former coworkers. One sent her a message that just read, "Always trying to be the hero, huh? How's that working out now?" 3 diners turned her away. One manager said, "We just don't want the media drama." Another didn't even let her finish filling out the application, just slid it back and said, "Not a good fit." Even at the coffee shop downtown, when she asked if they needed help bussing tables, the owner looked up, blinked like he recognized her, then shook his head and turned away. Didn't say a word. That night she walked the city, hand in her coat pocket, fingers curled around the dog tag. When she found him again, the old man was huddled beneath a bus shelter on 4th and Hayes, plastic sheeting barely keeping the cold off his shoulders. His leg looked worse. His breath was shallow. She knelt and set something beside him, a sandwich, half of her dinner. Wrapped in newspaper. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. She stood, turned, and walked away. And from a black SUV idling at the corner, a man in uniform watched her, then picked up his phone and made a call. By the time morning rolled around, Millbrook had gone from sleepy little town to center stage in a story nobody expected. It started with a murmur, a rumor, a whisper moving through gas stations and grocery stores. And then it became undeniable. That morning, at precisely 0800 hours, 200 soldiers in full dress uniform arrived and lined the street outside Maisie's diner. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. Rows of service members, men and women, tall and proud, standing shoulder to shoulder, their boots planted firm on the rain-washed pavement. They didn't say a word. They didn't need to. Their silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. They stood in formation, not one out of line, a wall of honor in front of a place that had traded dignity for $1. Some were local. Many weren't. They came in from Lexington, Fort Knox, and even 2 states over. All summoned by a single call, a ripple through the ranks of those who understood what it meant to wear the uniform and what it meant when someone who hadn't was the only one to remember what that uniform was worth. At the head of the formation stood a man in his early 40s, clean-shaven, with a sharp part in his hair and the kind of posture that makes you instinctively straighten your own. Full bird colonel. Metals polished. His face was tight with resolve and something deeper, grief, maybe, or memory. He stepped through the door of Maisie's and asked to speak to the manager. Walt emerged from the kitchen, pale as a church candle. I had no idea who he was, he stammered. His apron was stained with flour, and his hands kept twitching toward the tie around his neck, like he was hoping it might hide him. The colonel didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You didn't need to know who he was, he said evenly. But I did. He reached beneath his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, unfurled it slowly, laid it on the counter. That man you kicked out? That man you humiliated? He tapped the paper. His name is Sergeant First Class John R. McAllister. Retired. My father. Gasps rippled through the diner like a breeze in dry grass. My father carried me, literally, 3 miles through enemy fire in Fallujah after our Humvee was hit. With shrapnel in his leg. His own. He saved 12 lives that day. The colonel held up a photo, an old, grainy image of a younger man with a rifle slung over one shoulder and a bloodied bandage wrapped around his thigh. Same eyes. Same jawline. The colonel kept talking, voice steady but tightening. He earned a Silver Star for that. Refused to have it pinned publicly. Said medals don't matter when you're burying the ones who didn't come home. The place was dead quiet. Even Walt wasn't breathing. After Mom passed, the colonel went on, he stopped returning our calls. Said we didn't need to worry. That others needed help more than he did. We've been looking for him for 8 months. Someone in the corner had their phone out now. Filming. Probably live streaming. The hashtag started trending within 20 minutes. Hashtag veteran dishonored. Outside, the soldiers still hadn't moved. Not even to scratch an itch or wipe sweat from their brows. Just stood, waiting. Walt looked like he wanted to melt into the tile. He opened his mouth again. I didn't mean. No, the colonel interrupted. You meant it. You looked at him and saw a burden. But that man carried more weight than you'll ever know. At that moment, a woman from the local news pushed through the door. I recognized her, Rachel Marks from Channel 7. Always chasing puff stories. Not this time. Cameras flashed. Reporters started arriving in droves, asking questions. Who was the man? Who was the girl who got fired? That's when someone whispered, she's here. And we all turned. Ella stood in the doorway, hair tied back in a neat braid, eyes wide. She wore jeans, a threadbare flannel shirt, and the kind of hesitant expression that comes when you expect to be spit on and instead find yourself being saluted. All 200 soldiers outside turned in unison and raised their hands to their brows. Saluted her. The sound of those hands snapping into place echoed through the street like a gunshot. A sound that belonged on a battlefield, not outside a diner. Ella blinked back tears, hand to her chest like she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The colonel approached her slowly, solemnly. "You gave my father warmth when he had none," he said. "And you reminded the rest of us what service truly looks like." He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A medal. A silver star, dulled and worn, its ribbon frayed. "This belonged to him," he said. "He pawned it months ago to buy groceries for a homeless family. Said medals don't feed people." Ella stared at it like it might burn her fingers. "He wanted you to have it," the colonel said. "Said you earned it more than he ever did." He closed her hand around it gently, as if transferring more than metal, maybe history, maybe pain. The cameras caught it all. Walt's business didn't last a week after that. Boycotts. Suppliers pulling out. Every staff member quit. Local veteran groups started posting signs outside. "No honor here." And Maisie's diner, after 15 years, shuttered for good. Ella didn't say much. Just walked away, medal in one pocket, dog tag in the other. Didn't take interviews. Didn't grandstand. She just was. And sometimes, that's more than enough. 1 week later, a different door opened. Not a diner this time. Not a courtroom or a news studio. Just a humble double door painted sky blue with a hand-painted sign above it. The Hearth Community Kitchen and Veterans Resource Center. And standing inside, behind the counter in a borrowed apron, was Ella. No cameras. No crowds. Just clinking utensils, warm soup, and a little boy who walked in holding a $1 bill and a homemade cookie wrapped in wax paper. He was maybe 7. Freckles across his cheeks like somebody sprinkled cinnamon. He set the dollar and cookie on the counter with both hands like he was laying down treasure. "I saw you in the video," he said quietly. "Can you use this to help someone else?" "My grandpa was a soldier too." Ella didn't speak. Didn't need to. She just knelt until they were eye level, placed her hand gently over her heart, and nodded. That was the start of something. Not the kind of start that comes with ribbon cutting or confetti, but the kind that grows slowly, like roots under pavement. Invisible until it cracks something wide open. The Hearth had been a forgotten building on Elm Street, half-gutted after a fire 2 years back. The veteran-owned construction group who reached out after seeing the video, the Homefront Initiative, covered the costs. Said it was the least they could do. Ella didn't ask for the job. She was offered it. Manager, community kitchen, and resource director. Her job? Feed the hungry. Dignify the forgotten. Keep the lights on, sure, but mostly, be the kind of person she already was. The day the kitchen opened, John McAllister, Sergeant First Class, retired, sat at the back table sipping coffee. His leg was better now, propped on a cushion a volunteer had carried in from her minivan. He wore a clean coat. Shaved. Still quiet as ever, but not hunched anymore. Not hiding. He told stories sometimes. Not the kind people usually think about when they hear war story. He didn't talk about firefights or shrapnel or blood. He talked about Cora, his wife. How she kept a soup warm on the stove every Sunday, even when the heating bill was overdue. How she once walked through a snowstorm just to bring coffee to his shift at the VA hospital. How she said, "People break, John. That's what makes kindness holy." McAllister said her name like a prayer. Always Cora. Never my wife. Like saying it plain would cheapen it. One day, a reporter tried to sneak in again. Young guy, blazer too tight, with one of those nervous grins that never quite reaches the eyes. He didn't get 2 steps past the door before a group of veterans, some in wheelchairs, some standing, formed a solid wall between him and Ella. "No story here," one of them said. "Just people who remember what it means to care." The reporter left with an empty notebook. But that wasn't the end. Because while the Hearth flourished, Maisie's diner sat empty. Neon sign broken. Windows streaked with dust. A big for lease sign flapping in the breeze like a white flag. I walked past it one night and saw someone had taped something to the door. Handwritten, on lined paper. I stopped to read it. "We remember who stood up. We remember who stayed silent." Millbrook Veterans Association. The next morning, I brought donuts to the Hearth. Ella was behind the counter, kneading dough for the day's bread with flour on her elbows and that quiet focus she always had when her hands were busy. McAllister was telling a story in the corner about the time he'd rescued a stray dog from an oil field in Kuwait and smuggled it back in a duffel bag. The place smelled like cinnamon and bacon grease. Like home. After breakfast, Ella pulled me aside. "You're the guy from the diner, right?" "That day." I nodded. "You were the only one who followed us out." "I remember." "I couldn't sit there," I said. "Not after what I saw." She looked at me for a long time, then pressed something into my palm. It was the dog tag. McAllister's. He said to pass it on to someone who wouldn't look away. I stared at it, still warm from her hand. "You sure?" I asked. "He has a new one," she said. "Engraved, with Cora's name on the back." Later that day, a school group came through, part of some outreach program. Fifth graders, buzzing with too much energy and not enough volume control. Ella welcomed them in like they were royalty. They listened as one of the veterans read a story from a tattered journal. A boy raised his hand and asked, "Were you ever scared?" The veteran smiled and said, "Always. But I learned courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about doing the thing anyway, especially when nobody's watching." The kids fell quiet after that. Outside, the flag flew high, a gift from those same service members who'd stood at attention outside Maisie's. They came back every month, rotating who stayed, who cooked, who mopped the floors. They didn't need to be asked. They knew what debt looked like and what grace felt like when it finally got paid forward. And as the sun dipped low, casting golden light through the cracked windows of a rebuilt community kitchen, Ella stood in the doorway, arms crossed, chin up. The girl who gave away a plate of food and lost everything, and somehow found more. 2 months passed. The hearth was no longer just a kitchen. It was a movement, though Ella never would have called it that. She just showed up early, stayed late, and made sure nobody left hungry. She patched tears in old coats, remembered birthdays, and kept extra bus passes in a jar marked "Take one." No questions. But the story wasn't done with her yet. On the third Saturday in October, a man in a black sedan pulled into the lot just before sunrise. He sat in the car for a long time, engine running, eyes fixed on the building like he wasn't sure if he'd driven into the right version of reality. Eventually, he stepped out, adjusted the sleeves of his expensive coat, and walked toward the door. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair slicked back just a little too carefully. I knew that walk. Corporate. Military once, maybe. Now boardroom sharp. Behind him, the car remained idling, headlights dim in the gray morning. Ella was already inside, setting out trays of biscuits she'd baked the night before. The smell, warm butter, a hint of rosemary, hung in the air like a welcome mat. When she looked up and saw him, I saw something shift in her face. Not fear. Not exactly. More like recognition laced with caution. Like she'd seen a ghost she wasn't sure she wanted back. "Mr. Drexler," she said. He nodded. "It's been a while, Ella." "For years," she replied. Not that anyone was counting. He stepped forward, surveying the space like he was calculating square footage. "You've built something impressive here." "I didn't build it," she said. "They did." She nodded toward the kitchen, where McAllister was stirring a pot of chili, humming something low and slow. "I heard about what happened. The diner. The soldiers. The video." Drexler's tone was soft, calculated. "You made quite a splash." Ella didn't smile. "I didn't do it to go viral." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." He reached into his coat and pulled out a slim envelope. Laid it on the counter like it was a peace offering. "What's this?" Ella asked. "A job. Or rather, a chance." He opened it slightly so she could see the header, Ashford Corporation, Community Engagement Division. "We want someone like you running our public outreach. Real stories. Real faces. You'd have a staff, a salary, benefits." Ella didn't touch the envelope. "Why me?" Drexler gave a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Because people trust you. And frankly, the company could use someone with your credibility. We've had missteps. PR can only do so much." "So you want to use me," she said. He blinked. "I wouldn't put it that way." "I would." Her voice was still calm, but the temperature had dropped a few degrees. "This isn't charity, Ella," he said, tapping the envelope. "It's a chance to make a real difference. Bigger scale. Broader reach. Not just here, but statewide. Eventually national. Are you here because you care, or because I'm useful?" Drexler hesitated. That was all she needed. "I already am making a difference," she said. "Right here. One sandwich, one warm coat, one name at a time." He stood there, silent, then said, "You could have been anything. You're wasting it here." Ella's jaw set. McAllister walked over then, slow and steady, still limping, but with a rhythm now like the limp had joined the dance instead of tripping it. He glanced at the envelope, then up at Drexler. "She's not wasting a damn thing," he said. She's the reason I'm alive. Drexler scoffed, trying to recover. And what happens when the donations dry up? When the town moves on to the next trending story? Ella looked him dead in the eye. Then I'll still be here. Because they will still be here. He picked up the envelope and slid it back into his coat. I hope that loyalty's worth what you're giving up, he said. I know it is, she replied. He walked out without another word. The car pulled away, taillights glowing red as they disappeared into the mist. Ella stood there for a while, staring at the door. Then she turned and went back to the kitchen. Chili's ready, McAllister said. You want to do the honors? She smiled then. Small, tired, but real. Let's feed some folks. That night, after the kitchen closed, I found her on the roof. She was sitting on the ledge with a thermos of tea, the dog tag in her hand, turning it over and over. I don't regret it, she said without looking at me. Not a second of it. I know, I said. But it's okay if it's still heavy. She nodded. It is. But it's the kind of heavy I can carry. Below us, the town was quiet. Porch lights flickering. Wind in the trees. Somewhere, a radio played an old Patsy Cline song like a whisper from another decade. What Drexler doesn't get, she said, is that this place doesn't need to be bigger. It just needs to be enough. She held the dog tag up against the moonlight. And I think it is. I didn't say anything. Just sat there beside her, two shadows against the night, holding space for the kind of hope that doesn't make headlines. A week after Drexler walked away, something strange started happening. People came in asking for Ella by name. Not for handouts, not for interviews, just to shake her hand. One was a widow from Ashland whose husband had served with McAllister in '91. Another, a college kid who'd seen the story online and drove 2 hours just to drop off a box of winter coats. The hearth's walls, once bare, started to fill. Not with decorations, but with letters. Clipped to twine, thumbtacked along windowsills. Some handwritten, some typed. Each one a thank you. A story. A reminder. One note read, I was hungry in 2008. A diner in Oklahoma gave me soup. I've never forgotten that kindness. You helped me remember who I wanted to be. Ella read every one. Then, quietly, she built a wall of names. Not the senders, no. The lost ones. Veterans who didn't make it home. Civilians who fell through cracks. Her own mother, who never stopped working but never had enough. Above the names, she painted a line in white brush strokes. If no one else remembers, we will. One evening, McAllister brought in a young man, early 20s, twitchy hands, trouble making eye contact. Said his name was Thomas. No last name. He needs a place to sit, McAllister said simply. Ella nodded, pointed to the corner booth. We've got pie. You okay with peach? The kid didn't speak, just slid into the booth. She brought him 2 slices and a mug of cider. He came back the next day. Then the next. Didn't talk much, but helped mop. Swept the walk. Eventually, he fixed the broken hinge on the front door without being asked. After a week, he said, you don't even know who I am. Ella just smiled. Doesn't matter. You're here. But not everyone shared that feeling. That Friday, someone spray-painted the side of the hearth. Get a job. It was jarring. Ugly black letters slashed across the back wall. Ella stared at it for a long time. Said nothing. Then she handed Thomas a brush and a bucket of paint. By sundown, the words were gone. Replaced by a mural. Simple. A soldier kneeling beside a woman holding a plate. No faces. Just silhouettes. Above them, Thomas had painted one word. Enough. They didn't report the vandalism. They didn't need to. Because the next morning, 20 people showed up, paintbrushes in hand. Said they wanted to add to the wall. By the following weekend, the mural had stretched across the entire back wall. There were no artists, just people. A trucker painted his late brother's unit patch. A nurse added a tiny heart with a bandage across it. One elderly woman painted a garden of yellow tulips, saying her son used to bring them home from school every spring until the day he didn't. No names. No credits. Ella just nodded as they worked. Quietly laid out clean brushes. Brewed extra coffee. Thomas came in early every day now. Started locking up at night. And once, when he thought no one was listening, I heard him whisper to the wall, still here, Dad. Then came the letter. Official. Sealed. Addressed to Ella Hart, Director, The Hearth. It was from the Department of Veterans Affairs. They'd seen the footage. Heard about McAllister. Watched what Ella had built. And they were sending someone to tour the facility. Ella opened the letter, read it once, then folded it neatly and slid it into her pocket. Didn't say a word about it until the day they arrived. It was a crisp Wednesday morning. The door opened just after 9, and in walked a man in a navy blue suit, flanked by two others. Clean-cut, polished shoes, regulation posture. VA patches on their coats. Not one of them looked more than 40. McAllister sat near the front, sipping his coffee. He looked them over once, then went back to stirring cream into his cup. Ella stepped forward. "Welcome," she said. "There's breakfast on the warmer and hot coffee on the counter." The lead man blinked, clearly expecting a presentation or formality. She didn't offer one. They stayed an hour. Listened. Took notes. Ate quietly. When they left, the lead rep shook her hand and said, "This place, it's what we say we're trying to build. But you already have." She nodded. "It's not just mine." "I know," he replied. "That's what makes it work." That night, McAllister gave Ella back the dog tag. "You gave it meaning," he said. "But I want you to have something else." He held out a folded piece of paper. A photograph tucked inside. It was old, creased in the corners. A young man and woman standing in front of a brick house. He was in uniform. She held a pie dish. "Cora," he said, "on our first Thanksgiving." Ella looked down at it, then up at him. "I don't deserve this." McAllister smiled, slow and crooked. "You already lived it." The first snow came early. Light flurries drifted past the windows as the hearth filled with the usual rhythm, boots stomping warmth back into cold toes, mittens drying near the radiator, soft chatter over scrambled eggs and cheap syrup. Ella stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, humming quietly. A peaceful day. Until Thomas burst through the front door, face pale, breath fogging. "They found him," he gasped. "McAllister. He's not answering." He lived in a converted room over the fire station. We ran there. He was slumped in his chair, the little radio still playing Glenn Miller. Half a cup of cold coffee on the windowsill. His coat folded neatly on the bed. Ella crossed the room slowly, heart pounding. But as she reached out, he stirred. "Just resting my eyes," McAllister murmured, voice gravel soft. "Don't write the obituary yet." She exhaled shakily, knees weak with relief. Thomas laughed, tears already rolling. "You scared us, old man." McAllister smiled faintly. "Still here. Just slower." That night, the hearth was packed. Not for a crisis. For Thanksgiving. The tables were full: veterans, kids, parents, strangers who'd once just passed each other on sidewalks, now holding hands and sharing mashed potatoes. Ella stood near the door, watching. "Speech," someone called. She shook her head, blushing. But McAllister stood. Not tall, not loud, but present. "This place," he said, tapping the table with one finger, "isn't a kitchen. It's a memory being rewritten, one meal at a time." He lifted his mug. To the ones who stayed, and to the ones who finally came home. Everyone raised their glasses. Even Ella. A few days before Christmas, a small box arrived at the hearth. No return address. Just "to Miss Hart," written in elegant script. Inside was a folded American flag, carefully pressed, impeccably folded. Alongside it, a handwritten note. "My father passed last week. He spoke your name in his last days, called you his quiet compass. He wanted you to have this. Thank you for helping him feel like a soldier again, not just a ghost in uniform. James R. McAllister, Jr." Ella stood in the back hallway holding that flag for a long time, eyes glassy, lips pressed tight. She didn't speak for the rest of the morning. But later that afternoon, she hung the flag in the front hall, right above the chalkboard that read, "This week's needs, nothing. We have each other." McAllister's memorial was held in the very place where he'd found his second chance. There was no casket. He'd asked for a simple cremation, but there were uniforms. Rows of them, old and new. And a table with a tin of his favorite pipe tobacco, the photo of Cora, and his dog tags. Thomas gave a eulogy. He said just 5 words. "He made me stay alive." No one added a thing. They didn't need to. Afterward, the crowd filtered outside, quiet under gray skies. And there, waiting in the street, was a single soldier in full dress blues. He approached Ella and handed her a sealed envelope. By order of the United States Army, and at the unanimous request of his former unit, the Silver Star awarded to Sergeant John R. McAllister is hereby reassigned in legacy to Miss Ella Hart, in honor of actions in defense of dignity, justice, and silent valor in peacetime. There was a medal inside, the same one McAllister had once pawned to buy a family dinner. Ella didn't speak, just closed the box, pressed it to her chest, and nodded once. Later that night, after the chairs were stacked and the lights turned off, she sat alone in the kitchen, one candle burning low. She took out McAllister's photograph. and whispered, "I'll keep it going. I promise." Spring came slow to Millbrook that year. The frost held on like an old grudge, but eventually, green pushed through the cracks in the sidewalk, and daffodils bloomed beside the rusted fence behind the hearth. Inside, the kitchen hummed with life. Laughter echoed off the walls again, new voices mixing with the old. Veterans still came, but so did students, single parents, grocery clerks, folks trying to get back on their feet or simply to feel less alone. Ella stood behind the counter, hands dusted in flour, rolling dough with steady pressure. Same flannel shirt, same quiet strength, same dog tag on a cord around her neck. Some things had changed, though. A new sign hung above the front door, "The Hearth," in honor of Sergeant John R. McAllister. And beneath it, smaller, "Everyone deserves warmth, especially those who've known too much cold." One morning, a girl showed up. 15, maybe. Hair buzzed short, sleeves hiding fading bruises. Ella offered her a seat and a biscuit. Didn't ask questions. The girl ate in silence, then reached into her coat and handed Ella something. A postcard. On the back, in shaky handwriting, was one sentence. "I heard you help people." Ella read it, smiled gently, and pointed to the pantry. "Grab an apron," she said. "And if you're staying past lunch, you'll need to learn the chili." The girl blinked. "You're serious?" Ella nodded. "This place was built by people who showed up. You showed up." The girl didn't smile, but she stayed. Outside, the old diner across town remained dark. A faded for lease sign tilted in the window. No one ever bought it. It stood like a warning and a reminder. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the courthouse steeple, Thomas sat beside Ella on the back steps. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't brought him that plate?" he asked. Ella looked out at the street, golden light glinting off the windows of the mural-covered wall. "Sometimes," she said, "but I don't dwell on it. Because what matters isn't the what if. It's the what now." Thomas nodded, quiet. After a while, he stood, brushing off his jeans. "You coming in?" "In a bit," she said. "I just want to sit with the quiet for a while." He left her there, bathed in evening light, the scent of bread rising behind her, the dog tag warm against her heart. And in that stillness, she whispered the same thing she always did when no one was listening. "Still here." And that's the end of it. Not the end of her, or the people she helped. Just the story you needed to hear. So if you ever find yourself in Millbrook, down near the train tracks and the corner with the old mural, look for the blue door with the brush-painted sign. Step inside, and know this: you won't be forgotten. Not if Ella Hart is still standing at the stove. Not if kindness still has a heartbeat. Not if one hot meal can still save a soul in the rain.